and start with actually items number 1 and 7 probably should have been combined, but we'll take them in the order that they're listed. So as I think most everyone here knows, Jordan has accepted a position outside of Westborough. So he'll be continuing his work in the conservation space, but not with us, unfortunately. And so as a result, we need to select a vice chair. So I put it on the agenda in hopes that someone might raise their hand or someone might want to volunteer someone else. If we're not ready to do that, that's fine. We'll continue forward, but we do need someone to kind of fill in that space. And then ultimately, I'd like to have a conversation about kind of the status of this committee and its work in the absence of a conservation director. Not to say that our work necessarily has to fully stop, but I think it's a critical role, but we'll discuss that later. So any thoughts on a vice chair? And if we don't see anyone wildly raising their hands saying, pick me, Andy, 2 hands means yes. No, I'm just kidding. No, we're not going to spend a lot of time on that right now. This is such an awkward moment. Let's see, how long do we want to wait? TikTok. All right. Well, no need to make anyone feel uncomfortable at this point. Actually, Jen's not here. Isn't that what you guys did to me? I wasn't here. And then Jen, I'm just kidding. Okay, we'll move on then, and we'll hold off. So if anyone has a burning desire to nominate someone, or perhaps don't answer your phone if I start calling you because you know why. Okay. So we'll move on to the review of our meeting on our site visit on the 29th. Hopefully everyone had a chance to look at the document that Jordan put together, which basically outlined some of the questions that we had. And then in red, you'll see there that some of the responses we received when we met with EPA, et cetera, are answer some of these questions. So I'll just go around. If there's anything that wasn't captured here, let's make that known. Or as you reflect on the site visit, if there's anything you wanted to add. So I'll just go in the order that I see folks on the screen. Mr. Roche.
No questions.
Okay. Mr. Flynn.
Hi. I don't have any comments because I wasn't there. So I'm jumping in, maybe just a little bit of explanation. I'm jumping in at the request of Sustainable Westborough.
Yep.
In particular, Sustainable Westborough is interested in exploring whether a portion of the site might be suitable for a solar installation. Okay. And I don't know whether the discussion at the last meeting explored that. To what extent that might be permissible. Yep. But that's why I'm here. And going forward, I think Sustainable Westborough will be naming a permanent member. It could be me, it could be somebody else. But that's the going in interest that the organization has.
So we discussed that at our very first meeting, more from a historical perspective. And there is some history around that there was I guess certainly efforts and discussion to put a raised solar field on some of the property. Without getting into a lot of history, I certainly don't have that. I know Andy does and others do. That's not something this present reuse group has discussed. So it's something we can put out there as a possibility. I guess I would say with a note of caution that disruption of the ground that was previously contaminated and which has been sealed and capped is probably creates slimmer opportunities for that to happen. But again, I'm not an expert, so we can certainly put it in the parking lot as a potential opportunity.
There's also a potential to put a raise on top of the building.
Yep.
I would guess that that would have to be part of a major building renovation because you probably need structural work, but the building's old enough that the roof probably needs redone or will need to be redone. And That'd be an option, is to use top of the building.
If I may, the original idea a few years back was to use the part of the site where the landfill caps and everything were. That was the idea for the solar field. And that got knocked down for a lot of practical reasons. If we were going to look at a part of the site, actually the part of the site for ballasted solar field that would be good is where they were thinking about putting in the parking lot for the MBTA, because if you had everything above the surface, then we wouldn't have to worry about anything. So that can be something that can be put on the table for the future.
Okay, great.
That would be, my first thought. But again, we have to look at it. It's outside the area where the primary contamination was concerned. My concern about the MBTA parking lot is it would have required a lot of excavation for drainage systems, and that area was not investigated at all thoroughly. So that was my concern about doing anything where we might have to start digging up the ground. So.
Yeah, well, it may or may not be practical, but I know it's a subject that there's some interest in exploring anyway, to see if it is practical or not.
So Peter, I would say, as a representative of Sustainable Westborough, you're welcome to attend. We would, I think we'd have to go back to the selectmen to formally add a member of Sustainable. It's not to say we can't as an appointed position. I don't recall that was part of the initial group, but we can certainly do that but you're welcome to stay here just as we take votes. I wouldn't be able to count that as
That's fine, Shelby. I think if at some point Sustainable Westborough wants to have a representative in the group.
And we can address that. That's fine. I just wanted to, for others saying, well, why don't we ask Peter to vote? Okay, Mark, thoughts on the site visit that aren't represented kind of in what we've already been presented?
Yeah, Shelby, I didn't have anything to add. I didn't get to read the document carefully, so I may come up with something as we talk. The biggest thing I'm concerned with is who and when will approach Amazon for that side of the lake, and I don't think we can start those talks soon enough. So
okay, I'll just
Mark, the talks with Amazon, does it have to be done in the context of the Hocomonco reuse committee, or is that, the folks who would be interested in building trails and getting easements could follow their normal process and at least explore? I mean, there's no sense us getting in the way of them looking at easements if there's people who are ready to talk about easements with Amazon.
Yeah, we've required the BWALT and accompanying trails. It's kind of vague terminology that we put in the special permit for them to allow us, allow them some latitude to establish where they want the trails to be. So I think, with this body's permission, I'd like to start those conversations and say, look, draw some easements, propose locations for trails and connections to our side, the town side, so that we can.
I don't see any problem with following the process in parallel. Yeah. I mean, I would be surprised if this committee recommended a specific trail in a specific place, right? We would probably recommend as one use or a use some passive recreation with trails, where the specific trails and locations would be under the auspices of whoever's going to build them.
I think the one thing I was curious about was the conversation with the Active Transportation Committee. And again, I didn't read the notes carefully enough to see if you guys talked about the location of the BWALT and whether it was set on the south side of the pond or whether they were considering the north side of the pond. Because that is...
So that wasn't included in the notes. I did meet with John Burns and Julie Squires, both from the Active Transportation Safety Committee, specifically to talk about the vision of the feasibility study as it relates to the B-Wall Trail. Without kind of getting into a lot of detail, because we can certainly have them attend and kind of talk about the vision, the whole kind of corner parcel as it relates to connecting on the other side of not Flanders, Otis, thank you. There's some rework that's still being done as part of the feasibility study. So if you look at the feasibility study as it is right now, the trail, part of the proposed trail from B-Walt really follows that road we walked during the site plan. Where it crosses and all of that and how it exits, you know, but it definitely goes right through the property. So, you know, my approach certainly was not to say yay or nay. It was just really to listen to what Don and Julie had to present. They also made clear that the Otis Street intersection and that whole work, and obviously this sort of ties in with Amazon as well, is certainly something that we need to, they certainly want to understand as the B-Walt finds its way across this portion of town. So I think that there are multiple pieces we need to understand, and, you know, sort of as I was preparing for today's meeting, just, I mean, I think the Otis Street study, does it impact this or not, and how? In terms of use or reuse, and the Amazon piece, and certainly, you know, B-Walt, and if there are any other certainly proposed purposes.
Yeah, and Shelby, that brings up another thought. We need to make sure that the firm that's doing the corridor study on Otis Street incorporates the B-Walt in their recommendations. And I was, you know, I'm sure Jim has made them aware of it, but I want to double check on that to make sure that in their recommendations for improvements to Otis Street in that intersection, it is a corridor study. It's not just that intersection.
Yeah, right.
Section.
Do you want to follow up on that, Mark?
Yeah, I'll follow up with Jim Robbins on that.
Okay. Okay. Sarah?
Nope, it was nice to get out and see the pond on a beautiful day, but I don't have anything, any questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ellen?
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm wearing this mask because I had a bike crash in my face.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just to let you know. I just wanted to follow up something that Mark was saying about the B-Walt going through there, and I'm on the Active Transportation Safety Committee as well with Don and Julie, but the charm bracelet also goes through here, and it's, at least the way I had seen it and thought of it for a long time, is that they would be the same trail for quite a ways, because they both have to get across the Assabet River. They're both going to be coming from Otis Street. So just, we need to keep in mind the charm bracelet as well.
Great point.
Yeah, I think having been on the site,
That's all I had.
I'm almost envisioning the bike trail being further up, and then maybe an additional trail that comes closer to the pond, where maybe we couldn't put a paved area. But I agree that there are going to be sections where they're simultaneous.
Okay. Well, I think, you know, all of that, I mean, one of the things that's been pretty clear in all of our discussions is civil engineering and what could possibly uses be. So that will guide a lot of it once we determine, if we determine that that's a path we want to go. Okay. Ray?
No questions or comments from me.
Okay. Andy?
Regarding the site visit, talk about the contaminated areas. There looks like there, on the last bullet, it says, do they need to be secured with a barrier? I believe, should there be signs near them? I think we need to make this 2 bullets, one for the monitoring wells and one for the landfill. The landfill does need to be secured with barriers, and Beazer will be responsible for maintaining the landfill cap. That was made pretty clear when I asked about that.
Right. Yep.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're correct. Yes.
The wells themselves, they say the wells themselves have caps and locks and theoretically are secured. Well, having been in this business a while back, the locks on those wells are inadequate. Your standard little master padlocks or something like that, which you could probably knock apart with a hammer. And I would want to see better security on those wells, because if we have it open to the public, people come in. I mean, those wells belong to Beazer, but if they get a pile of sand and gravel and God knows what else poured down them, it's not going to be useful to them. I think they should be more interested in security for those well clusters, the ones that they leave on site. I would recommend that we talk about surrounding those with some kind of secure fencing. That's my opinion. But so there's two different issues there.
So one thing I should say, and it is mentioned in the comments that we'll talk about in just a minute, is that, well, I'll hold off on, because we'll talk about, I guess, the meeting as a whole when we met with the EPA. So, because we did talk about that, and their response, my instinct would have been the same as yours, Andy, and the response surprised me. So, Jen, thoughts about the site walk, sorry.
Yep. No real questions or comments. The only thing, it was nice to see the site finally. I was intrigued by the size of the building, just because RAC doesn't have any indoor space. And I didn't realize, I had been described to me in a different way, that there were large pillars all through it. So I was intrigued by how open it was in there. But other than that, it was just good to be out and to see the property.
Okay, great. It looks like Jason might have had to step away, so he comes back on.
Oh, I'm here, Shelby. Can you hear me?
Yep. Any thoughts
Sorry.
on the site walk that you wanted to add?
The only thing I guess on the question was the O&M plan and monitoring plan. I'm assuming that's going to answer the access questions.
Yes, I think so.
And then-
Well, it will start to.
Did they indicate the timeline on that? Because that,
Yes,
I think
so,
that affects us a little bit as far as what we can do.
Yeah, they said it's with their consultant, and they would expect it to us by in the next couple of months. So I think in our conversation I said so sort of July-ish, and they said yes.
Okay, awesome. I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So Jordan, did you want to add anything about the site visit?
Thanks, Shelby. I probably should have something to add, but I don't. And I missed the comments early in the meeting, and I apologize for that, but I don't have anything of value to add. So thanks.
Okay. All right. Well, I think it was certainly valuable to me. I think everyone just to actually walk the property and really understand the topography and the size and scope and certainly the building and surrounding areas as well. So as you see in the document, Jordan and I met with Mass DEP, Derek Golden, who has pretty extensive experience. Well, all of them do. It was clear they've been on this project for a long, long time. It's sort of like raising a child, it seemed to me. So they're very familiar with this site. And so we did pose a number of the questions that came up during our site plan visit to them. Those are in red. The first thing they made clear is that they would have an O&M plan for us. It would absolutely be shared with the town, and they are certainly willing to come back and meet with us, via this type of format at any point in time. So if that's something that this committee feels like we need to do, or there are specific questions, they're open to that. I do think, just as an outstanding matter, we just need to find out who's exactly paying for the electricity. Not a major thing at this point because of the use of the building. They were a little surprised that there were sort of, remember how we saw that like fan thing or something that was in there? They were like, yeah, no, none of our guys or our subcontractors should be accessing that building. So, and they said that the town it should be on the town's account at this point. So I'll follow up on that to find out where that stands. You'll see there from a maintenance perspective, and Hank touched on this a little bit earlier, is that the building does need some work. They sort of anecdotally said, obviously depends upon use, but The heating system would need work, and they were not aware of maintenance records on the building. So, that's something as part of any sort of study, I think that we would want to assess its use in its current form, and obviously for what we might imagine in the future. Hank, I see your hand up.
Yes, yes, Shelby, given the comments about nobody's supposed to be in a building and it should be secure, since it's our building, what town of Westborough's building, should we ask the building and grounds department to see to the security of the building and make sure that people can't get in there, and maybe even put some no trespassing signs or something?
We certainly can. Jordan, were you having a conversation with Christy or Jim on that?
I mean, I think the current lock on the building and on the gate, is left over from before the town really had access. So it's not like we, the town, put the lock on the door. We were just given the keys.
Mhm.
So I think that's something, to Hank's point, that's something we could do. Like,
Well, the gate access, they still need access to because of mowing and all of that, but yeah.
Gate is something different, and fire has access too, because I know that Jason
Yeah.
has his own lock on there, and they may have their own lock. I mean, you can interlock, they don't need access to our specific lock, but the building itself, we probably need to put a new lock on that door.
Yep.
Yeah,
I'll
it
follow-
would seem to me the building and grounds department's got the resources and the skills to, go walk by the building, and
Yep.
if put locks on it that they're comfortable with, that comply with town policy. And also they'd be the folks to sort out, hey, what's going on with the electric bill?
Yep.
If
I'll
we're
follow up on all of those.
Right, I mean,
Yes.
that kind of takes the workload off of all the volunteers and puts it on town staff.
And there's got to be a meter somewhere.
Yeah, and the meter's got a number. You call up National Grid and say, hey, who gets billed on meter number XYZ, and you'll get an answer. It may take a week or two, but you get an answer.
Yep. All right. Yep. I've got those couple of items as follow-ups, so I'll take that. They did confirm the shed that's there that could potentially be moved if it, we didn't want it there. It could be moved, and it is theirs. They store there are no hazardous materials or anything, although they might temporarily store materials that they use to test and the chemicals or whatever they use to test in there, but no hazardous materials. It's more like mowing equipment and that sort of thing.
Shelby, though, to clarify, I'm just looking at the notes. My memory is that the shed was for maintenance, mowers, etc., but that the storage pod was for the actual product that they removed, where they may store it temporarily until it's moved off site.
You are correct. Yes. Yep. You are correct. They did say as just while we're sort of on as we moved into the contaminated areas. So Andy, back to your question about the wells. They did say that a number of those probably, correct me if I'm wrong, Jordan, but we say that the wells can be abandoned, several of them. So I would imagine if they abandon them, there's some sort of capping process on them. They might still stick out of the ground or whatever.
No, they'll basically, what they'll do is they'll fill up the wells with grout, pull up, and they'll cut it off at the surface. And there might be a concrete pad left.
Okay.
But
Okay.
yeah, when they abandon the wells, they're not going to leave them open and they'll fill them up.
Okay. So, I mean, obviously that, being that those are, if you really look at the whole property and the schematics, they're all over the place. So,
Yes.
I think before we would want to, my sense is before we would want to open those up, we would want any that are going to be abandoned, that work to be done and understand that timeline.
Yeah. There'll be a few left because there is some continuing flow of material from underneath the not the lagoon area. So they're going to be doing periodic sampling and perhaps some bailing removal of material.
Right. Yeah. No, definitely some will remain open, but they indicated, and they went through, I won't bore you with, but they named them off very quickly as we were looking at a drawing of those that will be removed, which I think adds to our overall understanding of the property and kind of what, what ground we can disturb, not disturb, where we could put trails, not trails, or where there are posts that you need to be aware of.
Shelby, I think the specifics of like the wells that would be abandoned and the ones that they actively test and where they do sediment sampling and the timing, that I think my understanding was that would be memorialized in this updated O&M plan.
Correct.
I think once the committee gets that a lot of these questions will be answered.
Correct. Yes. Yep. You'll see that they kind of talk about when they do sampling, and then they also so. Interestingly enough, the wells that are going to remain open, my impression was they were sort of like, the locks of them are sufficient. You don't have to put a barrier around them. We're not, concerned. Now, obviously, now that the town owns the property, we may feel differently and we may request something. So I'm not passing that off, but their response was a little more relaxed than I would have expected.
Well, yeah, the wells are their responsibility. And if they get vandalized, I'd rather not be passive aggressive about this and say, okay, it's all on you. That's just me. So
I mean, I think it's prudent, even if we were to ultimately decide, let's open this up for more passive recreation and promote it, communicate it. I mean, because it's kind of open now. Anyone can walk around there, right? If you choose to. Would be to maybe have some signs or, or ask them to check the locks or whatever. So those, I think, also with the O&M plan can be things that we discuss with them.
Yeah.
They did say also, again, the fencing, they just said that they just want to prohibit any sort of off-road vehicles or any vehicle really from being in the lagoon and the landfill area. Obviously, as we go forward, we should think about what opportunities does that represent and at what cost, depending upon how we want to utilize the space. Sorry.
Yeah, again, I thought they were going to be responsible for the fencing.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Jordan. They feel like the fencing that is there now was their responsibility, but creating or doing something new for fencing would not be theirs at their expense.
I can't answer that. I sort of looked at it the other way. I thought that the areas that they maintained that they're responsible for, they would then provide the security for, whereas the town could remove the perimeter fence once the interior areas are secured. So that was my understanding, but the two understandings are diametrically opposed. So I think we need to get better information.
All right. Well, obviously we want to reserve. I mean, I think we want to make sure we have a plan before we tell them what we're going to do in terms of taking it down and all that. So. Just speaking of fencing, did anyone, I don't know how often people drive by there, but on Smith Valve, I don't know that I can pull it up. It looks like a car hit the fence or someone attacked the fence. I actually haven't had a chance to follow up with, let's see if I can find it. I probably can't. Oh, here it is. I don't know if you guys can see this, but yes. Oh, of course it's. No, you can't. It's blurred. That's kind of funny. No,
Can
you can't see it. Yeah.
If you email it to me, I can share the screen.
Okay. So anyway, the fence on Smith Valve is really caved in, like significantly. I mean, I know it's not in the best shape, but it kind of looks like something pretty heavy hit it and folded it in, which I will follow up with Christy on. I have not had a chance to ask Jeff if there was an incident or anything like that. So, okay. I'll do that in just a minute. Okay. All right. So any questions on the comments from the EPA, et cetera, that meeting?
Shelby, the only thing I would add, and it's easy for me to say this because I'm leaving and I'll just say, you should do this and you should do that. But my first conversation with those three Derek, Mike, and Paul was in 2020 before the new year. And when we spoke with them whenever that was, early April, it appeared like, my first conversation with them was around, oh, they need to determine which wells they want to abandon and this and that. And then we had kind of the same conversation as if they had not talked at all in the interim. So I just would suggest that you send them poke them a little bit over the next couple months, because I'm not sure how motivated they are to get that done.
A typical project management technique is they need to give us a date when they're going to have a plan, an O&M and monitoring plan that we can look at. Because until you have that, you don't know, you don't have any idea what the hell they're going to do. So that's the pivot point. Get them to commit to a time frame for reviewing their O&M and monitoring plan with us.
Okay. All right.
Just before we go further, I just got an email from Ellen Google saying she got disconnected from the meeting. She's trying to get back in.
I'll let her in.
Okay.
I wasn't watching that. That's my fault. There she is.
So noted. We'll get a letter to them as a follow-up to our meeting and asking them for that. Okay. So we've sort of talked, actually we already talked about the B-Wall proposal. And again, I think that probably having Don and Julie basically said that they had work to do before they could sort of comment any further on how the trail interacted with Hocomonco. I think that's probably a meeting where they can come back here and we can have that conversation with them. We've already talked about securing the building on site, so we'll make sure we take care of that. We just need a quick approval of the minutes of 3:10. So if anyone wants to make a motion, we can get those approved and posted.
So moved.
Second.
I think that was Hank and Andy. Okay, roll call vote as we need to do. Just go around as I see everyone. Hank?
Roush, yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Sarah?
I'll abstain because I think I wasn't there for that one.
Okay, all right. Ray?
Yes.
Okay. Andy?
Yes.
Jordan?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
And Ellen?
Yes.
Non-voting? Yep. Okay. And Jason, you still there?
Yes, and I am a yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Shelby, yes. All right, great. Thank you. Those are approved. We'll get those. Jordan, as one of your final swan song acts, can you see that they're posted, please?
Can do. I'll do that right now. Yeah. I'm just going to share my screen so you can see the damage.
So this is just not too far if you turn down Smith Valve from Otis. I guess it could have been done by people standing on the fence, but it's pretty significant.
The razor wire on top. I don't know if I would have wanted to do that. Okay.
Yeah. So I'll check with Jeff to see if they had any, accidents. There wasn't, as you can see, there aren't any, like the grass isn't torn up or whatever. So maybe it was just vandalism, but.
Shelby, it probably needs repaired, right? I mean, again, since we own the property, we're responsible for its security. The fence needs to be repaired. And either the DPW or the building and grounds, we must have a town department that has the resources to either do the repair or tell us to contract it out.
Right. And I guess it's also a question of how much do we want to do to repair this fence if ultimately we want to take the fence down.
Yeah, I mean, to me, just whatever they need to do temporarily so that it doesn't, that people can't just walk over it or something.
Right. And it's not that flat, but it does sort of invite, you
Yeah,
know, if I were an adventurous kid, I might want to climb over it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So it sort of brings us toward the end of the meeting here, and with Jordan leaving, I think that having the conservation officer director on as part of this committee is critical, given the land as we've seen it. So my concern is continuing our work in full enforce doesn't mean we can't still pursue some of the things that we've already talked about, like Amazon and understanding the trails and I guess exploring information. But moving forward with any great speed to me really hinges upon us having a conservation director to help guide our work. I just wanted to get the feel of the group here, comfort level of moving forward without that person. I mean, Andy, I know you're part of conservation, so I don't want to, you know, neglect that or negate it, but I also think having a town employee, you know, is important to this process. I'll open it up.
Shelby, again, there's a task that I've been thinking of, that we need to create a list of the potential reuses of the property. You know, kind of a list with a brief description of what the reuse would be, and then winnow that list down to what are the possible reuses that we believe are need to be considered and evaluated, and the ones that have been proposed but aren't going to be considered, you need to clearly articulate why. And none of that work requires a conservation director, right? I mean, if at some point in you know, creating and winnowing that list of potential uses, we run up against something where we need conservation expertise, I think we have an assistant there that we could ask for technical help. So to me, that kind of project management task of getting this organized as a project, and then so we can go attack this thing with some real resources in a structured way. If you stop and wait to do that, you know, you'll be at this forever.
Yeah, so can I just say that I feel like it took us a long time to get this committee started and fired up and running. And if anyone knows me at all, they know I'm not very patient, and I would rather plow forward as best we can and you know, see if we can get something, you know, useful there, as opposed to just a fenced in ice fishing pond. So you know, I want to keep the, you know, the ball rolling downhill. Keep the momentum.
Yeah. Well, I think another town employee can take this on. Let me ask you, Jordan, is there anything that you're doing at the moment which is so specifically conservation director related that no one else could do it?
For this committee?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I don't.
Okay.
I mean, particularly where in Shelby, Andy technically is the representative of the Open Space Committee. Gary Kessler's our conservation liaison. So with two conservation commissioners already on the committee, I don't think so. I mean, I certainly think that the conservation perspective needs to be considered. And when it comes to permitting, regulatory, I think that the committee is going to need expertise and advice. But I don't know that it necessarily needs to be put on hold until then. Shelby, really, I think you're also in need of someone on staff that can move some of these things forward, just like the administrative work of the committee.
Yep.
Which there are. I mean, not to throw anybody under the bus, but there are other staff members on the committee that potentially could do some of that work.
When it comes to, you know, permitting aspects, Gary and I are sufficiently aware of what the permitting issues are that we can provide some insight into that. I pretty much, know from a conservation perspective what we're going to need to do should certain areas in the buffer zone
Okay.
require work. So it's not rocket science from that perspective.
Okay.
The other thing
Yeah, I
too,
just, I wanted to put it out there, because to me, it was sort of the obvious question to ask. And Jordan and I have spent not a significant amount of time, but a fair amount of time together. And in his absence will be certainly felt. That's not to say we shouldn't continue, but to me, that's not my call. That's our call as a group. So just, does anyone else want to weigh in to opinions that are different than what you've already heard on this?
Not necessarily different, but maybe supplementing. As I said earlier, Sustainable Westborough has an initial interest in trying to assess whether the site may be suitable in part for a solar installation. And one of the questions there is, would it even be legally permissible? Because if it's not legally permissible, then there's really no reason to keep it on the list or pursue it. And I'm wondering if that legal issue can be answered.
So ground-mounted solar arrays are legal with a special permit in the industrial zone, which that is. But because it's town-owned property, there's really no town-owned property is zoned separately from everything else. So we really have no, I don't want to say no restrictions, but we can use it for what we want to use it, but we have to most likely have to get town meeting approval.
Mark, what I was thinking about was penetrating the surface.
Oh, right.
And whether, given the environmental restrictions that are on the site, whether that's even permissible. Because I know one of the things that Sustainable Westborough has considered is in the most restricted area, the lagoon area, which may not have any other uses for active recreation, whether a ballasted solar field could be put there that wouldn't interfere with any other uses. And it seems to me that the EPA restrictions may not allow that at all, or they may. But just getting some clarity on that would be.
Yeah, Peter, I can answer that question. They have to keep the cap free of any vegetation which can root through, can root and penetrate that cap. And this was one of the things that looking at the solar project a few years ago, you can't put a ballasted system up there, but only half the site is fenced off. Only half the site is the designated Superfund site. To the east, to the west of that, gotta make sure I'm looking at thinking the right direction. There's the area directly across from the MBTA station. There's quite a bit of acreage there. A ballasted solar system, ground mount solar system is feasible on that part of the property.
Okay.
And as long as we're not running conduit, there are other ground mount ballasted systems in town off of Milk Street, just south of the railroad tracks. A developer put one up there several years ago. And in fact, that's the picture that's on the front of the CAP report. So,
Randy, there's the one at Carlstrom Press Metal, right at the end of Fisher.
Yeah, but there they didn't put ballasted ones in. Those are on posts that penetrate the ground. So when I say a ballasted solar system, it's the concrete blocks that the panel supports are mounted on. So
right, I thought you said that the area you're talking about that was feasible could even do ground mounted. I may have misheard that.
Well, we can't do ground mount. We're talking about having the mounts on a concrete ballast instead of penetrating the ground. So we're making doubly sure that we're not borrowing trouble. That's all I'm talking about.
So I think this speaks to what Hank was saying in terms of sort of a list of uses and a description and sort of a, Santa's wish list here, like what could we do with this property, right? And I think that also needs to be broken down into near term, and long term, right? So Jen might want a basketball court in the, in the building. I don't know that it's, certainly big enough for that, but maybe that's longer term. But, opening it up for trails, as long as we have the O&M plan, we understand safety and all of that. Great, go ahead and enjoy it and walk around. And, there's a longer vision to build a dock so people can launch kayaks or whatever. So I do think, I agree with you, Hank, that we need that, and we can, it's not sort of an official agenda item, but I think we can certainly brainstorm that a little bit. If we want to here well, actually it's 4:49, so I'm not gonna.
Shelby, if people, there's been a lot of proposals for how to reuse the property over the last 10 years or so that we've been having this conversation. If folks just want to send me an email with what they think are the proposals that bear some review, I'm willing to take and do a cut and paste and put something together in a Word document in the next month. That we just start a running list of what are the things we've talked.
Hank, I'm happy to do that.
I would say that sounds like a job for a vice chair.
I can't commit to be a vice chair.
Yeah,
I can
no,
commit to do some
I agree with
tasks,
you,
but
Hank. I think that's a takeaway, and folks can just send that. We actually you could just send those to me, and I'll just start a running list, and then when we, as we get more into the project details, and someone that's really a whiz bang about project management and tools, then they can raise their hand and tell me how I'm doing it wrong. But yeah,
there's already a start on that was put together with the notes from the March 29th meeting.
Correct. So I'll start. Yep, I'll start that. I'm not going to use a Google Doc because some people aren't familiar with it. Just send me your ideas and I'll plug them in, and then we'll revisit those at our next meeting. What else do we need to do for our next meeting, guys?
Pick a date.
Okay, that's the easy part, theoretically.
Shelby, if there's a way to encourage the town departments to come forward with an email that says, I'll pick on the DPW because they're easy. Hey, the DPW director could send an email that says, my department is interested in possibly reusing the building over there. And here's a list of 10 things we might use it for, so that we at least get an idea of what the town departments might think they want to do to encourage our list, right?
Right.
I'm just surprised that the town departments haven't been more vocal, and would like to encourage them to be more vocal and then start getting specific.
Right. So we talked about that. It was, as I look back in my notes, I wasn't sure of the direction the committee wanted to go. And that is, we talked about, a department survey, then we talked about community input, then we talked about asking for, at a future town meeting, for money for for some sort of survey, like civil engineering survey. So I think to me, it's a big picture thing. Let's start big picture and then narrow down to what we think. And remember, the goal of this committee is to bring forward a recommendation to back to the select board, right? And maybe with some steps of how do we get there, again, near term and long term. But I don't think we have to have all of the answers from now into, to eternity. I think that I look at this as, I don't know, maybe you guys disagree, as a roadmap, but not a technical roadmap of how it's going to get done.
And for the longest time, the whole idea was that the property would revert to passive recreation with the exception of the multi-use trail going through it. That had been the concept for a very, very long time. Back when we were having this discussion several years ago, there had been an idea from the fire department to use it as a training area. I don't think at that time they really understood the limitations for dealing with the Superfund site and the once the AUL came out, that idea pretty much got squashed. But you could look at it from splitting from a conservation and recreation perspective, and I guess that's why you want all the ideas sent to you. So, yeah.
Yeah. So
If-
Shelby,
if-
I think
Go
there's a sequence to it, and I think Hank's got a really good grasp on the beginning of that, which is let's brainstorm all possible uses and reach out to the department heads and ask them what their thoughts are for it, because that'll help us establish any possible uses. And then as a committee, we can throw out the ones that just aren't feasible because of the limitations of the site.
Yep.
And then go out to the public with a survey saying, well, would you like to see basketball courts? Would you like to see passive recreation? Would you like to see a solar array? And try and gauge the community-wide, reaction to those, and so that we can formulate a recommendation. But then we need to take that final recommendation and get the civil engineering done. And that's
Sure.
what, we can't really do that yet because we don't know what we're engineering.
Right, well, that was my thinking. I guess I wanted to make sure that someone wasn't thinking otherwise. I also think we should be looking at the master plan as we think of our ideas. So what is the master plan? Albeit in a draft right now, I'll just remind folks that round 2 of the survey is open for folks to submit comments to that. But what is that telling us as well? But does anyone have any, for those that have been around longer than I have, any of these historical documents? Ray, I know you have a box of them. I'm not talking about that box, but maybe it's the same one of what has been proposed in the past. Is anyone aware of like a document that exists from any prior work? Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Well, we have our list already kind of started. So send those to me. Let's decide on our next time for meeting, and then I'll have that list ready. I'll have some of the other items that we talked about, hopefully closed out and addressed. And at this point, I think that's probably the focus of how we need to spend our time.
Shelby, I had reached out to Sela and, town clerk and town manager's office to see what documentation existed from the previous incarnations of this committee, and there is none. Just to add to the
Okay.
sentiment that, this committee will need to kind of create that documentation,
Okay.
unfortunately.
That's all right. Okay, there are benefits to clean slates with lots of history to support it. Okay. So looking at our calendars, I'll throw out the 26th. That's the Wednesday following, the Wednesday, not following Memorial Day because Memorial Day is late. Thoughts on the 26th? I don't know if that's a school committee meeting.
School committee meets usually on Tuesdays, I think.
No, we're Wednesdays at 6, and it is one, but like this time of day is fine.
Okay. 26th at 4 p.m. Does that work?
Mhm.
That works.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Okay, well, I'll get minutes out and then the agenda posted and all that good stuff. Jordan, I want to thank you for your time here. You will be missed, and you're always welcome back.
Thank you, Shelby.
But hopefully this project will be done by the time that happens, right? Otherwise,
So bring my family for a hike at Hocomonco Pond. That's my plan.
there you
Absolutely.
go.
Around the Gilmore Pond ADA trail and then over to Hocomonco. That's the plan.
All
Good
right.
plan.
There you go. Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Send those ideas. Don't wait until 2 days before, because they might not make the list. All right, bye guys. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Good
Bye.
night. Bye.
Thank you.